So this is the Magic 4 Pro, and it's the first proper flagship phone from the newly independent Honor. Last year, Honor split off from Huawei, effectively creating a fork of the brand that had been a Huawei subsidiary for the whole of its existence up to that point. With US sanctions starting to bite, an independent Honor, unlike Huawei, could sell phones with important features like 5G and Google services. And that's what we have here pretty much, a real flagship phone for 2022 with the googly bits and 5G bars that you'd expect, but which still kind of feels like a Huawei phone, sharing plenty of DNA with the Mate 40 and P50 series. But this is more than just reheated Huawei leftovers. It boasts high-end hardware befitting of a premium handset, a great camera system with one or two caveats, and truly ludicrous charging speeds. Take a sec to subscribe and we'll get stuck into our full review of the Honor Magic 4 Pro. So we're reviewing the base model of the Magic 4 Pro with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. That's not to be confused with the non-Pro Magic 4 or the super high-end Magic 4 Ultimate, which is only available in China. Anyway, this is the main Honor flagship for the West, and it feels just as well made as you'd expect for a phone that cost more than £900. In the cyan color I've been using, you get this striking, ever so slightly pearlescent finish on the glass back panel, along with svelte screen borders and curves that are a bit more pronounced than your typical Android flagship, contrasting nicely with the flattened top and bottom edges. A couple slightly unusual things to point out on both sides of this phone. On the front, there's an extra wide pill-shaped camera cluster, similar to what we're expecting to see in the iPhone 14, only aligned to the left. It's a bigger blemish than the single hole punch that most of the competition uses, but I haven't really been bothered by it. It houses your 12 megapixel selfie shooter and a dedicated depth sensing camera for biometric security. And unlike most Face Unlock solutions on Android phones, this one can be used with Google Pay. Around back, there's no missing this great honking camera bulge housing a quintet of sensors plus dual LED flash. It reminds me a lot of the design direction Huawei started in the Mate 30 and Mate 40 lines, and again plays into the idea that there's more than a little Mate DNA in this device. Of course, the days of Honor being able to use custom Huawei silicon in its phones are ancient history at this point, so instead the Magic 4 Pro uses the same Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 chip as everyone else in the Android world. Nothing wrong with that, and there's more than enough power to go around here. Plus, Honor also has its GPU Turbo X feature, which it says is supposed to give a boost in gaming performance. I'm not a huge mobile gamer, so while the handful of titles I tried, like Asphalt and Mario Kart, worked great, I can't really say I noticed them being that much quicker than other Snapdragon 8 phones. You don't need to be a gamer though to appreciate the Magic 4 Pro's display. This is every bit a flagship screen with all the major spec boxes ticked, up to Quad HD Plus resolution, up to 120Hz refresh rate, plus battery saving LTPO technology to clock down as low as 10Hz when you're not swiping or scrolling. And you can tweak the resolution and refresh rate too. I settled on stepping down to Full HD Plus resolution and up to the full 120Hz refresh rate after I found that the lower 90Hz refresh didn't offer much of a battery life improvement. There is also a dynamic refresh rate, which is supposed to intelligently switch between the different modes, but this locked way too many apps to 60Hz for my liking. Anyway, this display is fantastic for outdoor use, outshining the Google Pixel 6 Pro in direct sunlight, and colours are bright and punchy by default, with the option to tune it to more natural looking hues if you prefer. Audio-wise, this phone benefits from a pseudo-stereo setup thanks to two grills on the top and bottom borders, along with an earpiece tweeter. It's a decent combination for gaming or YouTube videos, but lacks some of the bass of devices like the Pixel 6 Pro or S22 Ultra, being just a little bit tinnier than those phones at higher volume levels. The most interesting audio feature might be AI Privacy Call, which is designed to improve privacy in good old-fashioned phone calls by adjusting the volume of the mic based on the position and proximity of your head. I can't say I've noticed much of a difference, not that I make a lot of phone calls in busy places, but it's an example of innovative thinking in an often overlooked area. This is just one of many features in Honor's Magic UI, which is now up to version 6.0 in this phone, and if this looks familiar, it's probably because the entire thing has basically been inherited from Huawei's EMUI. Before they split, the two brands basically ran the same software under different names, so what we have on the Magic 4 is pretty much software that has that Huawei look and feel, brought up to date on Android 12. A few caveats here: there's no dynamic color theming or any hint of Google's Material You design language, so the whole thing feels a lot more like Android 11 than I'd like. Certain weird holdovers from earlier Honor and Huawei phones are here, like this global search feature that lives behind a swipe down on the home screen. There's no way to replace this with a swipe down to view the notification shade, which is much more common on Android phones and a lot more useful in my opinion. And other iPhone copycat features can get in the way too, like this loadout of cards instead of widgets. If you want what Honor calls classic widgets, you need to drill down further into the menus. The lack of any quick camera shortcut besides the one on the lock screen is also slightly baffling, considering this used to be in the old Huawei software. Probably my favourite feature in Magic UI is the multitasking setup, which again is copied over wholesale from the Huawei side. A swipe and hold gesture from the bezel activates this iPad-style floating shortcut bar, and from here you can conjure up windowed versions of apps, manipulate them, expand them, or collapse them into a little icon. This phone has a really solid loadout of biometrics too. We already mentioned Face Unlock, which works great, and handling notification content can be hidden until the phone sees your face, just like on the iPhone. And the in-screen fingerprint scanner uses Qualcomm's 3D Sonic Gen 2 sensor, so it can unlock faster and without needing to blast light at your fingertip. Otherwise, on the software side, this feels pretty much like any other Huawei or Honor phone. It has its own distinct design language that definitely shows some iOS influence, but at the same time feels like it's a bit out of date compared with the rest of the Android world. The Magic 4 Pro's design makes its camera module a major visual feature, so let's break down exactly what's going on around the back here. You've got 50 megapixel main and ultra-wide cameras plus a 64 megapixel periscope telephoto with 3.5 times zoom level. Despite the lack of optical stabilization in that main camera, which was kind of a red flag when this phone was first announced, I've actually been pretty impressed with the quality of stills from the Magic 4 Pro. In most conditions, the large main sensor produces shots with pleasing colors, not too much oversaturation, and plenty of fine detail. And the phone handles challenging backlit shots pretty well too, even in portrait mode with the subject wearing darker clothing. Meanwhile, the ultrawide provides a dramatic perspective at the cost of a little bit of image quality, especially around the edges of the frame. Where you really start to run up against the hardware limitations though is in darker conditions, especially with the main and the ultrawide. Although photos in darker scenes generally look bright and clear, especially from the main sensor, go pixel peeping and you'll notice some pretty aggressive noise reduction, leading to some photos looking blotchy up close with fine detail being scrubbed away. The issue here isn't that night photos always look bad, from the main camera at least they don't, but that when you look closely things generally are a bit less detailed than other flagships at around this price point. As for selfies, the front-facing cameras mirror a lot of what I saw from the Huawei P50 Pro back in January, with a wide field of view, decent HDR and low light capabilities, and a tendency to brighten selfies a bit more than most other phone cameras. Overall, a decent showing, but I did prefer the more natural look I got out of selfies shot on the Pixel 6 Pro. Funnily enough though, when it comes to the telephoto, that 3.5 times optically stabilized periscope, Honor performs a lot better than the equivalent camera from Huawei, which on paper is pretty similar. Like the Google Pixel 6 Pro, its zoom is usable up to around 10 times, and I got some great looking video out of it too at around 5 times. In fact, video performance in general is reasonably good, with highlights including smooth stabilization from all 3 of those rear cameras, even with some challenging subjects. In moderate to dark conditions and certain moving shots, you notice a bit of judder creeping into the footage, so this definitely isn't iPhone quality video, but it's certainly acceptable for an Android phone in this price range. What is a little troubling though is the tendency for a few seconds of dropped frames at the beginning of many clips, which I've experienced over and over again with this camera. Regardless of the video settings, maybe 50% of the footage I shot had this off-putting stutter in the first second or 2 of clips, and I also noticed it occasionally when switching between the cameras. This is very likely fixable in software, but it's disappointing to see camera bugs like this making it into the shipping firmware. The battery situation in this phone is simultaneously completely amazing and totally unremarkable. To start with the bad news, or at least the not so great news, it's got a 4600 mAh cell, which is not exactly large for a flagship phone with the kind of specs we're looking at here. Despite that though, I've actually gotten a decent level of longevity out of the Magic 4 Pro here. Never more than a full day, but 4.5 to 5 hours of screen on time was easily doable. It's about the same as I've been getting out of the OnePlus 10 Pro and just a little weaker in performance than my Pixel 6 Pro. But Honor makes up for this pedestrian performance with some truly ridiculous charging speeds. 100 watts both over a wire with the bundled plug, or wirelessly using this absolute unit of a wireless charging stand. This thing is chunky as hell and kicks out a suitably cacophonous amount of fan noise when it's charging. Still, being able to plug in or even just drop it on the dock, regardless of how low your battery level is, and reliably get out of battery anxiety territory in 5 or 10 minutes really does change the way you use and charge your device. It's just a different experience to using a Pixel, a Galaxy S22, or even an iPhone. So the Magic 4 Pro is a solid overall phone that bodes really well for the future of Honor as an independent brand. The company has a few things it needs to address in future software updates though, like those hiccups in video performance, and some of the general kludginess in its software that makes it feel a bit out of step with the look and feel of modern Android. And for future flagships, we'd definitely like to see a return of table stakes features like OIS in the main camera. This phone is by no means cheap, so leaving it out just seems like a bit of a weird cost-cutting measure. If you're buying on contract in the UK, you'll find some pretty great deals around on this phone. Buying outright, it's a tougher sell, and you've got some pretty capable alternatives to consider, like the OnePlus 10 Pro or Google Pixel 6 Pro, both of which are £100 to £200 less than the Magic 4 Pro, so maybe wait for a bit of a discount if you're thinking of buying SIM-free. That's it for now. Let us know what you think of the Honor Magic 4 Pro down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.